Hey guys, this is the Noodle coming right at you. I thought I'd change it up today. I've been told a million times, you know what? Never, ever, ever, ever tell anybody anything personal on YouTube. There's a few YouTubers out there that know me and I know my real name and where I live and what's going on. But I thought I'd tell you just a little bit about me right now. And what I do for a living is I write. There's a few other small things I do, but I've been able to be lucky enough to write things and people pay for them, companies or ghostwrite and other things. I'm not a millionaire. I don't make 500 grand, but I don't have to worry about money. I can do whatever I want. So this one's just a fun story I wrote. Sometimes I submit these to what's called Creeps McPasta or Creepy Pastas on YouTube. And if the people read your story, they give you a few bucks. If they don't, they send it back and say, hey, you're garbage, rewrite it. So I thought I'd read you something I've written just a little while back. It's not edited yet. So yeah, I may make some mistakes reading it. And if I do make some mistakes and have to start a sentence over, forgive me. But let me tell you something. I've got some great stuff coming, some more comedy relief for you guys. So funny, I can't read through it because it's hilarious. So here we go. This is called There Is Something Sitting at the End of My Bed. What I'm telling you now is real. I didn't remember the time it happened, so I'm telling you this story after the fact. I stood in front of a mirror combing my hair and brushing my teeth in my mother's bathroom. It was much larger than the one my brother and I shared in the middle of the house. I was in my second year of junior high, and my brother was 4 years older than me, a senior in high school. My mother worked the graveyard shifts and usually got home after my brother and I were already in school. I had to be in class at 8 o'clock, and my brother wrestled, and he was always out by 6 a.m. So I always had the house to myself every single morning. I loved that time alone. I could eat whatever I wanted, get out of bed whenever I wanted, be on time or late for school, it didn't matter. When my mother came home, she would stay up for a while, pick up the house, then crash. She was always in bed when I got home. So each day I checked the answering machine for calls from the school telling her I was late to class or I missed school completely. I simply deleted the message and went on about my day. By far the best part of my morning was putting on my favorite music CD, cranking up the amplifier all the way, and dancing around my house without anyone telling me to turn it down. It was my morning routine, and it always made me feel good on my way out the door to catch the bus. I had just finished brushing my teeth that morning, and I heard the amplifier click off. My mom's room was in the back of the house, and I heard a grunt, and something was moving down the hall. I instantly started shaking. I felt a cold pressure build in my chest. It was a familiar feeling. You see, I had anxiety problems because I was raised with my mother being gone every night when I went to bed. There were countless nights that I'd woken up and looked at the end of my bed, and there was something sitting there. It was a person, but it didn't seem like a real person, just the shadow of someone. I would try and scream, and the words wouldn't come out, stuck in my throat from fear. The shadow would turn and look at me, and the face looked like an old man, almost weathered. It had dark sunken eyes, gray wrinkled skin. Its forearms rested on its knees, and its arms looked a little too long for its body. Its fingers hung almost to the middle of its shins. Its fingernails were black with large cracks that seemed to let out a horrible smell and turned under each finger and pierced the skin. When it felt me looking, it would turn and open its mouth, which was filled with rows of rotting teeth. Its left arm would raise and point directly at me. The color of his eyes would turn from light gray to pitch black. With the raised arm, you could see the veins pulse with what seemed to be black, inky fluid, which would drip on my bed and disappear. It would tilt its head, and its eyes would widen. A low groan would radiate out of its mouth, and with a cloud of vapor, it would move in waves from my feet to my head. Once they reached my head, they became static and slowly faded away. I couldn't help but notice it had very long, clear hair. It hung halfway down its back. After a few moments, it would place its hands back on its knees and look straight forward again. Same thing every night. Over the years, my fear had taken over and had gotten so bad there were times I didn't sleep for days. I was afraid to fall asleep. Sometimes I could finally scream for my brother. He'd come in and tell me to shut the hell up and go back to sleep. The unusual thing is, as soon as my brother entered the room, the figure was gone. Most of the time, I'd pull the covers over my head in fear and eventually nod off. But it all stopped when I got into junior high. But the anxiety of those endless nights were locked into my mind. I tried to control it, but it was now a permanent part of me. Suddenly, the movement in the hall fell silent. I felt the anxiety spark harder in my chest, and my heart started to pound. I felt my neck lock, and the thumping of an instant headache rose right into my eyes. Those feelings I felt years ago came rushing back. It was like a wave that slammed into me. What was out there, I thought. My brother had been picked up 2 hours ago and had no way back home. My mother didn't get off for a few hours. I froze as I peeked around the corner into my mom's bedroom, and there was no one there. Suddenly, I heard the stomping again. The floor was shaking. It seemed as the house was shaking as it moved toward me. It was coming right into the bedroom. I took one step back to the bathroom and shrunk in the corner. There was no way out. The sound got louder and louder and louder. I stood up and thought I'd meet whatever it was face to face. I moved around the corner and I heard a blood-curdling scream. My eyes closed in fear for a moment. When I opened them, I saw what I had seen. I saw what I hadn't seen for over a year. A man with black sunken skin, a translucent face, and he was coming right at me. It was just what I'd seen so many nights in my childhood. He grabbed me, pulled me in. With his mouth open, he shrieked again. How could this be? It was light outside. It was daytime. I felt my body go limp, and all went black. When I woke up, my brother and his friends were standing over me laughing. I couldn't hear them. I could just see them making fun of me and pointing. My brother was running around with a see-through old man mask with long silver hair he had picked up from one of his friends that was left over from Halloween. When I saw the mask, it all went black again. This time when I woke up, there were several paramedics in the room, and my brother and friends looked a little scared. A few of them were crying and rubbing my brother's neck. The paramedics realized that I was conscious, and he said, "Are you with me, buddy?" As he racked my chest just a little to wake me up. I just looked at him. My brother pushed his way to me and said, "Are you okay, James?" My body was numb. I just looked up at him and seemed to stare right through him. He looked at the paramedics and said, "Is he okay? What's wrong with him?" The panic continued to grow in his face. I shut my eyes, and for a third time, it was black again. James, wake up. Wake up, James. I felt a warm hand rubbing my face. It was my mother. They had called her, and she'd rushed home from work to be with me. I knew it took her exactly 43 minutes to get into a car and get home. During the summer, she'd called just before she'd left, and I challenged her to race home in under 35 minutes. She would just laugh and say she would drive as fast as she could, but she never made it in under 35 minutes. "James, wake up, baby," she said. I finally blinked my eyes a few times and reached for her. She rubbed my arm with her left hand and wiped my tears with her right. I turned my head and saw my brother again standing a few feet away, leaning against the wall with his head in his hands. I looked down and I was hooked up to all kinds of machines. I could see a green line bouncing as my heart beat. My arm was tight from the blood pressure cuff and I had an IV in my hand. The paramedics were talking to my mom, telling her that they didn't see any injury from the fall and started to pull me up. I was able to sit up and they started to take the blood pressure cuff off and pulled out the IV and told my mom they thought I'd be okay. They quickly finished their work and left. I was still sitting on the ground. My brother and his friends helped me up onto the bed, and I looked at them, and they looked as though they were still in shock. "Are you okay, baby?" my mother said as she gripped my face with both of her hands. I turned my head to answer, and I realized I could no longer speak. I had lost the ability to communicate in any way. For some reason, no words came out. I could form them in my head, but nothing happened. "Help me get him into bed," my mother said. They helped me into my bedroom. I crawled into bed, took a deep breath, and went to sleep right away. "Hey, James, it's time to wake up." It was my best friend, Eric. "You've been asleep for 3 days, my man," he said with a crooked smile. "You're missing too much school, and I'm not going to keep doing your homework." So I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and opened the fridge. I was starving. I grabbed some turkey and cheese and started to make a sandwich. "How you feeling?" Eric said. I just looked at him and poured a glass of milk. I saw my family sitting in the other room talking, and as I finished I saw my family in the other room talking as I finished making my sandwich. My brother Mark looked up and walked right to me. "Hey, buddy, you look a lot better today," he said. I walked to the table and started to eat. The food tasted so good. My mother walked in and sat down and pulled my hands to hers and said, "James, can you say my name?" I looked at her and furrowed my brow. Again, I had words in my head, but nothing came out. My brother looked at me and said, "Say something, damn it." He turned and walked down the hall and slammed the door. "Baby, tell me what happened. Why can't you speak?" my mother said. It had finally sunk in that I had lost the ability to communicate with anyone. I just rubbed my eyes with both my hands and started eating again. Weeks went by and nothing changed. I couldn't speak or communicate. I could do everything I did before, but I couldn't write and the words wouldn't come out. I went to many, many doctor appointments and they couldn't figure it out. I started back in school and was immediately tormented by my classmates. They thought I was crazy, but I had Eric right by my side all the time. He would always step in and either get them to stop tormenting me or start pushing them and try to fight. Over time, my brother and his friends started to make fun of me. It became relentless. I couldn't see him without a smart-ass comment about being retarded. My mother changed her shift at work so she could be there when I left for school and came home. About 4 months went by, and I walked in the house, and my mother met me in the door. She said, "Come in and sit with me, love." I sat on the couch. She looked at me and said, "What happened that day? The day that you fell down. The day that you fell down." I looked at her and wanted to say something, but again, I couldn't speak. I couldn't remember what happened to me. I remember brushing my teeth and then remembered Eric waking me up. I just looked at her. She started to cry, and I pulled her in towards me. She asked my brother all the time what happened. He told her he'd forgot his wrestling tights and had to come home, and he found me on the floor. That story never changed. My brother finally graduated from high school and left home. My life became a nightmare. My condition finally drove all my friends away, and my mother suffered and suffered. Rumors started circulating that my mother physically abused me and hid it from everyone. So she lost her job, and we were going to lose our house. My brother never stepped in to help. He just lived his life from thousands of miles away. Her condition became worse, and she became numb to all of it. She was truly alone in life. Another year went by, and one morning I woke up, walked into my mom's room. She was tucked under the covers. I pulled them back. There wasn't any movement. I put my hand on her head, and it was cold. I touched her chest, and there was no breath. I looked at the nightstand where she kept her meds. 2 of her bottles were completely empty. I knew she was gone, and it was my fault. I sat on the side of the bed and stroked her face. As I looked at her, there was a knock at the door. I walked out, and it was Lonnie, one of my mom's last remaining friends, with a plate full of cookies for us. She looked at me and asked, "Where's your mom?" I walked back to the room, and she followed. She saw the same thing I did and called 911, but it was too late. She was gone. 4 days later, my brother was standing in the driveway with a brown suitcase, looking like it was such an inconvenience for him to come home. He came in the house. He looked at me and said, "You know this is your fault, right?" I just looked down at the floor. He called his friends, and 30 minutes later, he was out getting drunk. About 4:30 a.m. in the morning, I heard the door open and my brother stumble in. I got out of bed and walked down the hall. I flipped on the light, and he was standing in the kitchen, holding himself up on the counter. I took a few steps toward him, and he stumbled back and fell down. I rushed over to him, and he was laughing. He looked up and said to me, "I fell down just like you did when I scared the shit out of you at Mom's room," he said with a smile. He looked at me and said, "You don't fucking remember what happened, do you? Oh my God, you're dumb. What the fuck is wrong with you? I fucked you up, man. I knew you were home and the stereo would be cranked up and practice had been canceled, so I told my friend we should go scare the shit out of you. My friend John told me he had an old man mask in his car. We should pull it on and make you shit your pants." So I pulled it on. We turned off the music. I grabbed you and you screamed at the top of your lungs. You started to shake, your knees buckled, and you dropped like a little bitch to the ground, he said, laughing again. You were you were twitching like a scared little schoolboy, just like when Mom wasn't home. You're just a big pussy, he said. I scared you so bad you couldn't talk anymore, you dumb fuck. Now you know. He went to stand up and fell down again and passed out. I realized that my brother and his friends never told anyone what they had done. They never told anyone that it was because of them I couldn't communicate in any way. It was because of them my mother was dead. My pain turned to anger as I thought of my brother and his friends keeping their little secret. Lonnie picked me up and took me to the coroner's office to sign some paperwork. We were in the car and she said the results were back in on my brother's autopsy. He had died of alcohol poisoning. I just looked forward with my hands on my knees as we drove. I'm so sorry, James, Lonnie said, as she touched my hand and said, you're not alone. You'll always have me. What Lonnie didn't realize is that I was the reason Mark was dead. I forced him to continue drinking that night. I killed him. After that, over the next 5 to 8 years, my brother's best friends either went missing or were found dead in the most horrific ways. To this day, the officials don't know what really happened to them. I never spoke the rest of my life, but my translucent friend was sitting at the end of my bed every night watching over me. He made sure I was safe.